We use exponential notation when we have an expression of the form a raised to the nth power. Here a is the base and n is known as the exponent. N is the number of times the base occurs. For example, we could write 2 cubed. That is 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. Recognize that the base 2 occurs 3 times, which is indicated by the exponent. Here are 2 basic rules for dealing with bases that are negative. If we have parentheses around the base, the negative sign is actually part of the base. Then the exponent will determine the sign of the final product. If we have an even exponent, then the product is negative. For example, negative 2 to the 4th exponent. Negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 16. Notice that the base is negative 2. The negative is part of the base here because it's inside the parentheses. And then that base occurs 4 times, indicated by the exponent. If we have an odd exponent, then the result is going to be negative. For example, negative 2 raised to the 5th power. That negative 2 occurs 5 times as factors, and then the result is a negative 32, because we have a negative times a negative is positive, times a negative is negative, times a negative is positive, times a negative is negative. Again, odd number of negatives will give us a negative, even number of negatives will give us a positive. If we don't have parentheses, we have to be careful. The negative sign is not part of the base. It's treated as a separate factor. The negative sign is applied after evaluating the exponent, and then the result is always negative. For example, negative 2 cubed. Notice that the parentheses are not here, whereas up here we had parentheses around the negative 2. Here we do not. So negative 2 is not the base, 2 is the base. Think of it as negative 1 times 2 cubed. The negative is on the outside. So we have negative 1 times 2 times 2 times 2, which is negative 8. Or in this example, negative 2 to the 4th. Again, the negative is not being repeated because it's not in parentheses. Only the 2 is being repeated because the 2 is the base. We have negative 1 on the outside times 2 to the 4th. So that's negative 1, and then the 2 occurs 4 times as factors, leaving us with negative 16. Let's evaluate negative 6 squared. Notice that we do not have parentheses around the negative sign, so we can think of this as negative 1 times 6 squared, which is negative 1 times 6 times 6. That will give us negative 36. In example B, we have parentheses around the negative 5, which indicates that the negative sign is being repeated. So we have negative 5 times negative 5 times negative 5. And negative 5 occurs 3 times, indicated by the exponent. Now we can do the first two. Negative 5 times negative 5 is 25. Times negative 5, we get negative 125. In example C, the parentheses again are around the negative sign, which means it is being repeated. Negative 3 is the base that is being repeated. The first two, negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. And then 9 times negative 3 is negative 27. Negative 27 times negative 3 is positive 81. In the next example, we'll look at some applications. From sea level, a submarine can descend 37 feet per minute. What is the depth of the submarine after 6 minutes? If it's 37 feet per minute, we can multiply 37 times 6. And we can think of that as a negative 37 since it's going down. I'll do some work off to the side here to get the product. 6 times 7 is 42. Carry the 4. 6 times 3 is 18 plus 2 is 22. So we have 22. And negative, because we have negative times a positive, the product is negative. What is the depth of the submarine after 6 minutes? 222 feet. 6 friends lost a total of $300 at a casino. How much did each friend lose if they all lost the same amount of money? We have 300 that they lost, so let's think of that as a negative value. And we're dividing it by 6 friends. Off to the side, we'll do the math. 300 divided by 6. 6 goes into 35 times. 5 times 6 is 30. Subtract and we get a 0. Bring down the 0. 6 will not go into 0, so we make that 50. And negative divided by a positive is a negative, so we can think of this as negative $50. Each friend lost $50.